morning. Today we're doing the third in our series of quick breads. We're doing the biscuit method. So I have my Tuesday students in here. They actually measured their ingredients out already in the kitchen. We're going to go over the procedure and then they're going to make it. We'll come back for part two, shaping them, getting them ready, topping them, and putting them in the oven. So the first thing we want to do, we're going to get in the habit this year of pretty much taking our dry ingredients. So we have 12 3/4 ounces of flour, tablespoon of sugar, teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of baking powder. The recipe says you can omit the sugar, but then said they really don't have any much taste to them. It's not a whole lot of sugar, it just gives it a little bit of flavor, so it's not really dull and dry. So the reason for sifting it is it'll aerate our ingredients, so it'll be easier to mix. It also disperses the sugar, the baking soda, and the salt throughout the ingredients. I like to sift my ingredients on parchment paper, and I'll show you why in a minute. You can sift it into a bowl or another container. I just find I'll sift it on the parchment paper, and then if I was baking bread or anything else, I can reuse the same parchment paper. So, sifting that in, right? Set aside my sifter. This way you can take your parchment paper, you fold it up, your ingredients go in and it still stays nice and aerated. So that's going to help mixing in our butter. We have our butter here, that's 3 ounces, or it said 6 tablespoons. As I worked with the students, butter does work the same as water. So when you're doing water or butter or milk, you can do, if it says 6 tablespoons, you can actually do it by weight and it'll work out with your butter. So what we're going to do, we're going to break our butter into the flour. And in this recipe, I looked because it said room temperature butter. So I was wondering why it said room temperature butter. It said the difference between a pie dough and your biscuits. Your biscuits are going to rise more just because of the baking soda as acting as your leavening agent, whereas your pie dough doesn't have that. So we want to use the nice cold butter with pie dough so it's nice and flaky. So just remember that because we'll be getting into pie shortly. That'll be one of our base ingredients we'll be working on in the beginning. So as if you looked up or made a pie before, we're going to break our butter into here. Recipe also said you could use shortening or you could use lard, but the flavor will be a little different. We tend to use that butter because the butter has, a little bit better flavor than shortening's kind of drab, and the lard, we tend not to use that because it's an animal fat product. So if a person's vegetarian, all of a sudden they find out that we use lard, they're generally not happy. So the recipe also has a cup of buttermilk. It says a cup to a cup and an eighth. So I have a cup here. If we need to add a little bit more liquid, I'll add it, but again, we'll use the first quantity and see from there. So we're going to add our liquid in. Bring it together. Same thing, like I said, if you made a pie, or even when we made our bread, similar. This is going to be a little bit wetter than your bread dough because we're going to be rolling it out. So at this point, with our other quick bread stuff we saw, we don't want to over mix this, as that'll make it less flaky. So we're just kind of bringing it together, and I'll show you once, like right here, we're bringing it together, starting to look like a dough, and you'll feel it. The liquid will start to pick up your flour, and then generally we'll take it.
That's a 6.
I'm going to do it right on my parchment for today.
Auto body shop.
And then this way I can take my parchment paper, slide it right onto a half sheet pan, and as other stuff that we're doing, we're going to roll these out to about 3/4 of an inch. So if your dough is really thick like this, you refrigerate it, it's going to be hard to roll out. So what we want to do, we're going to take it, once it combines all together, and like I said, it's still a little sticky on parts, we'll pick up all the dough that's on here, press it down, Make sure you get everything off your hands. And then what you can do before you put on the half sheet tray, since we're going to be using it very shortly, I won't even bother plastic wrapping it. What I'll do, take my parchment, press it down, and then throw it on a sheet tray. We'll refrigerate that for just a short time. That way it just re-chills your butter a little, so when we roll it out, it's not too soft. And that's your mixing. So like I said, part 2, we'll get into shaping them, cutting them out, finishing and topping them. And that's our biscuit method. So as you can see, all of them are somewhat related, where the mixing time is very quick, but on the other hand, slightly different, where the last one we did in the mixer with the creaming method, the muffin method, we just put our liquid in dry, mix them very quickly. This is almost a combination between the two. That's why I like to do that 1/3. So we'll be back for part 2. So we're on to step 2 of our biscuits. Our dough has chilled in the refrigerator. So after you make the dough, we will leave it in the fridge just so that butter will chill back up. So with this, we're going to add just a little bit of flour. And when I tell people, whenever you're using a rolling pin for anything, you'll flour the table. Little flour on our biscuit dough, both sides. And we'll actually flour the rolling pin. So what I'll do, put a little flour on there and just rub it in. And what that does, if your rolling pin has any moisture, or just even the plastic rolling pins, they tend to stick to your dough. So roll it around, make sure we're good. We're gonna roll it to 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch is the thickness. So when we roll, you want to keep going opposite directions. That way it's nice and even. And with biscuits, pies, anything like that, you don't want part of the dough this thick and part of the dough this thick. So we really want to work on that evenness. What I'll usually do, I'll turn it over at least once or twice. And that just gives you, make sure both sides are nice and smooth.
Woo! Nice and smooth! Woo!
So looking at this the next time, if we do this recipe, I might even add just a little bit more liquid than I did the first time. It'll be good biscuits, but it's a little on the dry side. So we get it to our thickness. This looks like pretty much a good 3/4 of an inch. With the students today, they will actually be doing it with a ruler. I have my cutter, a little bit of heavy cream, half sheet pan. So as you have all your ingredients and your stuff, you're ready to go. With biscuit dough, since we want it nice and flaky, what we'll do, and when you're cutting, make sure that you're cutting as close together so you don't have a lot of extra dough. With quick breads and pie dough and stuff like this that we're rolling out, you can actually, and I'll flip them upside down like we did with the other stuff. That way the pressure of the cutter going down, if you flip it over, it'll rise even better. With things like this, we will do it, you can roll the dough back together once. You'll have a decent biscuit on the second roll. After that, we tend to throw those scraps out because by the time you roll it 3 times, you'll see that the dough begins really tough and just doesn't make a good biscuit. So for our purposes today, I'll re-roll this in a few minutes. For our video purposes, I want to show you the finishing of it. So, let me grab a cup. Like I said, I'm going to finish mine with heavy cream and sugar. You can use milk. Some people prefer just to brush the top with some butter partially through the baking. I like to do them with that heavy cream. Just gives it a little bit more richness on top. And the sugar, since we do have a little bit of sugar in the dough, just gives it that little bit of sweetness. So make sure you don't need a whole lot on the top, just enough to brush it to wet it. And purpose of that is, like I said, giving a little bit more, a little more flavor on the top. And then when we put the sugar on there, it will actually stick to our liquid. Just a little sprinkle on top. Now when you take that first bite, you got a little bit of that sugary taste and the richness of the heavy cream. And that is our rolling. The next thing we do, we're going to bake them in the oven, and then I will show you our finished product.